join in with the pledge, please. All right. Good evening, everybody, administration, public. Welcome to our board meeting this evening. We're going to start with any communications or comments from the public and the press. I don't see Mr. Beckstead here tonight. Is there anyone out there in auditorium land that would like to have a moment with the board? Seeing none, we'll move on to the next item on our agenda, which is board correspondence. I don't believe we have had any formal correspondence with anyone from the outside. So we'll move on to information and reports. And first is the report of our annual external audit, independent audit. And we have Mr. Jason Coleman here from Fuss Charles here virtually. And there he is. Hello, Jason. Can everybody hear Jason? Yes, I believe we are. Thank you.
Can everybody see the screen?
Yes, we can.
I'm the audit principal on the engagement, and I have with me Peter Steiger, who's a partner as well. We're information, as well as the other supplementary information. These two schedules are unaudited. We do compare them for consistency with financial statement numbers, but again, they are unaudited. The next three bullets, the schedule of expenditures of federal awards and the two independent auditors reports that go along with it. So the schedule of expenditures of federal awards is related to all the federal monies that the school receives through grants. Those grants require additional audit procedures, specifically over compliance. And pleased to report that we found no compliance issues with any of the federal monies that were awarded and the compliance with the respective programs. Next slide, just a few highlights of the audit financials again. From the general fund, total revenues increased approximately 8.4% compared to the prior year. Expenses increased about 7% compared to prior year, and the unassigned fund balance increased about 20.5% or $8.1 million. Capital fund, a significant capital improvement project was completed during the fiscal year. And then lastly, the special aid fund, which contains your state and federal monies, the COVID monies, the ARPA and ESSER funds. This was the last year of those funds, and they're no more COVID monies coming down the pipeline. And the last slide here, management letter comments, consistent with prior years. The fund balance is over the 4% property tax law requirement. And it's a consistent comment. I believe it's about 22% this year, which is a slight increase from last year. Management's provided a response on how they are going to address that in the coming year. And that has been provided as part of the agenda as well for the response. That response is also included in the schedule of findings and question costs to the audited financial statements. With that, I'll open it up to any questions.
I guess the only question I might have is, in your estimation, I guess in a few words, this looks like a clean audit.
That is an accurate statement. It was a clean audit. Yep. So I'd like to again appreciate Mallory and her team. Again, new to the role and the position this year, replacing Nick from the prior year. And she's very responsive and helpful with all of her questions and audit requests throughout the entire process. So I'd like to commend the team. And again, it was a pleasure working with everybody and make the audit process awesome.
I guess just to point out to the board that among our, under other items for action later on tonight, we do have on the agenda approval of a corrective action plan that Mallory has signed off on for the audit, for any of the audit findings. We'll be looking at approving that later on. Any other questions of Jason? Appreciate you being here.
Thank you very much. Appreciate you having us.
Okay.
Have a good night, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Take care.
Okay, we'll move on now in our agenda and move on to reports from board members, starting with Mr. LeBlanc and the Facilities Committee.
Good evening. The Facilities Committee met at Jefferson Monday the 23rd, and the entire committee was there with the architect firm that we selected, Megan Vanderbroek and Phil Squadrito, and Bill Lint was present. We talked about the future capital project proposals that were brought up, and that took most of the meeting. She elaborated on all the proposals, and our homework was to vote on the ones that we would think are priority for the district. We also talked about a few issues around Jefferson, the fence for security around the property, and some drainage issue. We also talk a little bit about the water bottle filters, which will be the best option going forward for the kids to drink the best water. And that was a short meeting. The next meeting will be at Nightingale on October 28th.
Okay, thank you, Robert. Any questions of Robert and his report? So I assume that as far as capital project priorities and such, there'll be lots more discussion.
Yeah, I didn't see the results, but they're collecting the data, and they'll probably put dollars to it and see what how it turned out.
Okay. Anything else for Robert? Don't do that.
Will there be a presentation to the board on that data for the capital project?
Yeah, so the process will be, at the next meeting, we'll review where the results were in terms of our priorities. We'll also be looking at how those priorities line up with the projected budget of what we can spend. It's going to be a pretty tight fit, I think,
Okay.
especially here at the high school. And then we'll present that certainly to the full board.
Okay.
I'm not sure if it'll be in November, but we can probably start getting some of that information back out probably by then.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, next is the policy committee report, and Mr. Monroe is not here this evening. I've asked Mr. Peretta if he would just give us a quick rundown of the last policy committee meeting.
Okay, the policy committee met a week or so ago. New business, we had 7131 non-resident students. We'd be asking to rescind that policy. And we're going to look at some other language at our next meeting, but for the time being, we'd ask to rescind the current policy till we get the new language straightened out. 7440 student voter registration. We were going to add a statement regarding that staff should take great caution to not influence student choice of political affiliation. We reviewed 8430 independent study, 8440 homework, and then the regulation associated with homework, 8445 grading. We reviewed some 3000 series, 3150 school volunteers, the regulation associated with that, 3210 visitors to the school, 3210 the regulation associated with that policy, 3211 public expression. We're going to add to the fourth paragraph of that, at no time will the Board of Education condone the name of an employee or student to be used in a public session in a derogatory or demeaning manner. Policy 3230 public complaints. We reviewed that. There's a regulation and there's a couple regulations associated with that. We reviewed those. No changes. 3231 complaints and grievances by employees was reviewed. No changes. 3232 complaints and grievances by students reviewed and no changes. 3240 student participation reviewed, no changes, and 3250 parent student organizations reviewed and no changes, and 3250R booster clubs was reviewed with no changes. And that's that.
Any questions on the policy committee report? Hey, next we'll hear from our student ex officio, Isabel. What do you have for us tonight?
Just a quick update of what's happening in the school. Our homecoming dance is this Saturday. Our pep rally will be tomorrow at 1:30, and tomorrow night we'll have our homecoming football game against Potsdam. Also, next Thursday, we're having Rocktober here in the auditorium at 7 p.m. There have been some concerns with students about the surveillance cameras, specifically the way they're positioned to view the bathroom, and Mr. Brick and I looked at that the other day, and every camera angle in the bathroom is the same for each of the 4 corner bathrooms, and you can see the first stall from the camera of every bathroom and the entrances to the side of the corner, but you can't see the sinks where most of the mishaps happen. Also, lunch has been very good this year, great improvement there, and a lot of people have been eating the school lunches. That was all.
Thank you, Isabel. You're going to look at some corrective tweaking of the cameras?
Yes, we are. Yep.
And kudos for Christine Calaruso. How, in what way is it good? You mean healthy, or the flavor, or?
There are way more options every day. I remember there used to only be like one meal option, but it's a bit more diverse, and we always have a salad bar, so if you don't like the options, you can just make your own salad, and there's way more options.
Thanks you.
Good to hear that right from a student. Okay, thank you very much, Isabel. Moving on to my report. First thing that I have is I'd just like to bring forth some sort of more formalized board goals that most of which I touched on last month. But again, these would be for adoption later on in the meeting. First board goal is the Board of Education will develop a written handbook for the student ex officio board member. And there are a series of 3 objectives listed with the completion of that goal by January 31st. Second board goal would be the Board of Education will develop written procedures for onboarding newly elected board trustees. Again, this plays off the fact that we don't have any new board members with us this year, and this seems like a good time to tighten up our orientation and onboarding procedures. So again, there are objectives enumerated for that goal as well. Board goal number 3 is the Board of Education will investigate the costs and benefits of changing our document storage, board clerk record keeping, and agenda workflow platform from the Google Suite to Diligent Community. And when I talked about this last month, I referred to it as Board Docs. Board Docs is still, it's a Diligent company, but what I've understand now is that anyone that is using Board Docs is eventually going to sunset, and the new product that everyone that uses Board Docs now will be using is called Diligent Community. And there are some objectives that are enumerated there as well. We did have a 4th board goal that was proposed by Trustee Murphy, excuse me, and this is the Board of Education will create a focus goal on the graduating class of 2025 by using tools such as the LifeTrack survey, a graduation ceremony policy and/or logistics, and a board-sponsored reception event for seniors. And there are some objectives that would result in that goal being achieved there as well. I'm happy to take questions on these now. I can't speak an awful lot to goal number 4, and Trish is not here this evening to do that for me, but I'll do my best. Again, I'm happy to take questions now, or we can wait until the vote later on to discuss. I guess we'll wait till the vote later on. Okay, the next thing that I have is sort of a recap of something that Ron and I attended. On October 4th, Ron and I attended a new training that the Champlain Valley Education Services BOCES in Plattsburgh held. It's aimed at strengthening the relationship between superintendents and board presidents in particular. It's a new training that is being offered by NYSBA statewide starting next year, and this was sort of a pilot for that program. One of the focus points of the training was something called a Team Communication Styles Assessment. TEAM stands for Tell, Engage, Analyze, and Mediate, and each of the participants was asked to complete that assessment. After completion, a report was generated, and the report is sort of a synopsis of your preferred communication style and how you're most comfortable working with other people. The theory is that the more you understand your communication style, the better you're able to understand other styles that other folks have and how and why they approach things the way that they do. Other sessions focused on collaborative leadership, where Ron and I discussed district priorities, and there was another session on maintaining a healthy relationship between the president and superintendent. Felt like it was a really good training, very positive. For me, it was just good to essentially have Ron to myself for several hours, been traveling and sitting with him at the table and talking about issues and getting to know each other better, getting to know a little bit about how we approach things a little bit better. You know, there's always other things for Ron to get to when we have a meeting in his office, and he was sort of a captive of mine for several hours. You have anything you want to add, Ron?
No, I think it was a really a good opportunity, and it's something we'll probably even do at the administrative team level. Just not quite as in depth, but look at the 4 different communication styles, because sometimes it can be a little, like I won't tell what Paul was, but I was an engage/analyze. And when you're talking with somebody who's a teller and you're trying to communicate, you have to understand they have a preference, I have a preference, and how do you bridge that gap? So I think it's a good opportunity for us all to learn, you know, just in terms of keeping communication open. So it was a good day, and Paul did not fire me when I hit the railroad tracks just a little too fast.
Yeah, well, it
So
happens.
Ron, did you feel safe, captive to Paul all that time?
Well, he drove, so I guess I was the captive. So the next thing that I have is a recap of the NYSBA annual business meeting that was held virtually on October 10th. There were about 300 school district delegates, including myself, that attended. There were 37 resolutions that were considered, and attached to your agenda is a rundown of the resolutions that were adopted. I find this a really interesting process. In a nutshell, resolutions are submitted by the NYSBA Board of Directors and by local boards of education. And they're reviewed by a resolutions committee. And once a resolution is placed on the floor, there's time for debate. There is an opportunity to vote. And some of the resolutions are quite vigorously debated, and others, you know, not so much. But the resolutions that are passed become positions that NYSBA advocates for at the state or federal level on behalf of their member boards. So it's democracy in action, essentially. On the downside, the meeting clocked in at just under 6 hours, but on the bright side, that was a little bit quicker than last year's, which was about 8 hours. One thing that I did pick up on as the meeting went on, it was clear that lots of boards of education read through the voting delegate guide and provide their delegate with guidance as to how they would like to have various resolutions voted on by their delegate. I found myself in a situation where we didn't do that, so it was just kind of up to me to make my best judgment on how I should vote. And I felt like it would be valuable for us to, ahead of time, look through the delegate guide, find some resolutions that sort of, you know, we have an interest in, and you guys give me or whoever our delegate is direction as to how we should vote. There were several people who, you know, made their statement about a particular resolution, and they mentioned that that was how their board wanted them to vote. So I think that that is something that in the future we should try to make some time to do. The next and last thing that I have is...
Sorry. Yes.
Oh, go ahead.
Just comment on this. Good idea. I think you should bring it up. Yes, it would be nice for us to review that guide before. I have a question. Did we have any BOCES representation there? At
from
that
our
meeting?
BOCES?
Yes.
I don't know for sure. There was nobody that spoke. I can tell you that from our BOCES. There was no way to ascertain exactly who the delegates were, and I don't know if there was anyone from SLL BOCES that was a delegate to the convention, or to the meeting.
Okay.
Okay, 2 nights ago, board members and regional superintendents, school administrators, et cetera, gathered at the St. Lawrence Lewis School Boards Association Regent Dinner with Roger Catania. Kevin, myself, and Ron attended. We had a fine dinner, served and cooked by BOCES culinary arts students. They didn't introduce the kids this time, so I don't know how many Massena students were involved, but there always seemed to be lots of them. We heard remarks from Regent Catania, including updates on, I guess, 3 hot topics: the Rockefeller Foundation AIDS study, the SED regionalization study, and the work of the Blue Ribbon Commission on graduation measures. My takeaways were on all 3, based on what Mr. Catania had to say, was that there really wasn't a whole lot new that he was able to tell us about, except I guess there has been a pushback for local districts to submit their strengths and needs data on the regionalization study. That's been pushed back. He did mention that was pushed back a few weeks, but other than that, there really wasn't a whole lot of new and exciting information from Mr. Catania. And Kevin, I wonder if you have anything you wanted to say, and Ron, the same, just as your impressions.
I appreciate the region coming up, and it's always good to hear from the region and to get together, and you know, that's part of being represented. As far as the information, I felt there was a lot of information lacking. There doesn't seem to be any clear-cut dates for the implementation of the new graduation measures. It's still being sorted out, but my takeaway was it doesn't seem to be quite as fast-tracked, I guess, as the regionalization seems to be, which to me, I'm disheartened by. The graduation measures could help students directly, and that seems to have no end to when it's going to be adopted. We weren't provided any clear dates as it's all being sorted out, but it seems as though the regionalization study is quite clear that it's being fast-tracked with very little input from anyone, and not much local communities or stakeholder input. I think I'm concerned about the regionalization study because as a Massena School District board member, we're charged with representing a very defined taxing boundary. All of us are charged with every decision we make is within our taxing boundary. And when we just make decisions as to what our education is, tax rates, how much we're going to raise taxes, and every other district in St. Lawrence County in New York State does the same thing. So it's interesting to me that the Board of Regents and SED wants to try to get us to come together and make decisions about how we would spend money across those lines and how we would share money across those lines. And I understand the intent is for more opportunities for kids, but we were charged with representing the kids within our specific region, along with everyone else, within our taxing boundary. So I would hope that as Mr. Burke participates in the convenings of the different superintendents, he would prioritize the representation of the taxes that are collected within Massena Central School District and the interests of the students within the Massena Central School District. And keep the priorities focused there, because I have concerns about the rollout of the regionalization plan and what the final intent is. There's a lot of gray areas as to the final implementation and interpretation. So the skeptic in me wants us to be cautious.
Ron, anything to add?
Two things. I think Kevin is spot on when we start talking about the Blue Ribbon Commission work has been completed. We need dates, we need details. Our kids are getting left behind, and the time has come, and enough. And on the other part, I still have optimism, as I mentioned at the last meeting, about the regionalization. However, the devil is going to be in the details, and along with Kevin and a couple of others, I share some major concerns right now, not knowing exactly how this process is going to roll out, and whether or not there will be opportunities for more than 18 superintendents sitting in a room coming up with a plan to listen to our stakeholders and to hear our boards. I'm concerned that the way it looks right now, and I hope I'm wrong, because we haven't seen the details on how this is going to happen, but I'm concerned that what could happen is the 18 of us will sit in a room, come up with a plan, and then present it to you informationally. And that to me is the wrong way to be doing this. Education really needs to be, this is why we have school boards of education. And if we usurp that authority of the local school board, I'm very concerned. We're going to go through the process. Assistant Superintendent Charleston and Bailey and we've been working on it. Really, the other two have done all the legwork. We'll do our due diligence. We will make it so it's a good product that we're sending in. But I think we need to keep our eyes and ears open on how this is really going to roll out, and what the role of the 10 of you will be, and what the role of our stakeholders will be. So, again, I'm optimistic that it can work, but it has to be done the right way.
One of the things that I mentioned to the regent after the dinner on a sidebar conversation, and I am optimistic, and the ultimate goal of all of us is more opportunities for students. Right now, we're charged within our taxing boundary, but I would hope that through this information gathering process, maybe that we've heard the term, or it's a new term that's come out called transcript gap, and that's the opportunities afforded within the different school districts to their students. And maybe that's the information that could be beneficial to really point out how much of a gap exists across a certain region. And it's not to point out someone's shortcoming, one district's shortcomings. Every district does the best they can, but really it points to a failed system that doesn't provide an equal level playing field for kids. And that's the important message that should go down to New York, go down to SED. So.
Well, I'll just add that Robert and Joyce and myself will be going to NYSBA convention, leaving tomorrow. And I anticipate that there's going to be a lot of talk about the regionalization plan, from districts all over New York, because from what I see, there's an awful lot of concern about the entire process.
I'd be curious of what NISBA's position is on the regionalization plan.
I'm not sure that they have one. In fact, there was an effort during the annual business meeting, and again, this was at the end of a 6-hour meeting. I believe it was the Massapequa board president attempted to put a resolution on the floor, which required a separate vote to suspend the rules and all this kind of stuff as well. Essentially what happened was the motion to suspend the rules that would have allowed the vote to come to the floor never passed because it was all done at the end of a 6.5-hour meeting, which is unfortunate. And what they were getting at was to pin NISBA down to advocate for, essentially shelving the regionalization plan because of weaknesses and questions that are being brought forth about it. So essentially, I don't believe NISBA has a position because they haven't been directed to take a position yet.
Well, maybe you can direct them when you're down there.
I'll do my best. I'm sure the folks from Massapequa can speak for themselves.
I think
better than I can.
The longer this rolls out, I think it's going to be clear the message from most school boards. Be interesting when they get on board.
Mm-hmm. Well, that concludes my report, unless anyone else has questions or comments. And if not, we'll move on in the agenda to reports from administration and Mr. Burke.
So my soapbox is actually a perfect segue into the school board recognition and the hard work and the vital role that our school boards play. So I want to thank all of our 10 board members for the dedication that they give to the Massena Central School District community and our children and our staff. The work that you do oftentimes goes unnoticed. There's a lot of work also that goes behind the scenes, as you can see from our various committee reports. We can't do what we do without the support and the knowledge and the insight of the Board of Education. So on behalf of us, the school, we thank you for your role, and we hope that you enjoy this little business gift. We know some of you really like to take notes. And for those that are going to NISBA, take that hopefully with pride. So, again, thank you for all of your efforts.
Got our signature.
How about that?
Beautiful. Thank you.
Thanks.
Ron, thank you very much. I'm sure it was Ashley that found these,
That's right.
did all the work that was required to acquire them, etc. But thank you very much.
That was very accurate, Mr. Haggett.
It's certainly an honor to represent the community on the board, speaking for myself.
Okay, and at this time I would ask Ms. Charlson to come forward and present the annual district data review.
So before I begin, I would like to also express my gratitude to the board during Board Appreciation Week, and just thank you for all you do for our school community. And personally, thank you for entrusting me in my new role. I'm extremely thankful to be working alongside staff and students here at Massena, and look forward to continuing our work together. So with that being said, let's take a look at our annual goals. And receiving feedback at the last board meeting, I know each of you have the information in front of you, so I will do brief summaries. If you have any questions, please let me know. And I'm going to use the clicker here for the first time. Okay, so first we'll take a look at our enrollment. And what we did with the enrollment data was cleaned it up and did a 5-year glance. And so you can see really our enrollment has pretty much stayed the same for the last 5 years. And that's enrollment of all students. The next slides break it up into the subgroups. You'll see over the last 5 years, our Native American population has increased by 63 students. Our students with disabilities has stayed pretty much the same. And we've seen a slight decline in our economically disadvantaged, homeless, migrant, and foster care students. And before I move on to chronic absenteeism, does anyone have any questions on enrollment? Okay, so as you know, chronic absenteeism is students missing 10% more of the days of school. So it's 10% of their enrollment. So majority of students that are here all year, it's 18 days by the end of the year. So this first slide with chronic absenteeism shows grades 1 through 8. So the blue is all students. So you'll see it's very similar over the last 5 years, hovering in that mid to high 20% range. So last year, the June 2024 was 25% in grades 1 through 8. The other subgroups you'll see are the different colors, and you can see the variations from year to year in those subgroups. Chronic absenteeism for grades 9 through 12, again in the blue, is all students. And you'll notice from June 2022 to June 2024, it has decreased 8%. And you have heard Mr. Oliver speak of MTSS, multi-tiered systems of support. And with that work, we're continuing to see chronic absenteeism decrease.
I have a question.
Yes.
So 2021, most students were remote, no? In 2021, that's why the number is so low? So
Yes.
22 is the year that we went back to normal.
Back full.
So that's
yes.
that's why it's high, and then we're doing good.
2021 was the hybrid year. I obviously wasn't here, so I'm
So that's why,
listening
yeah,
whispers.
it's hybrid. But a lot of the people that didn't want to be here, they weren't here. So
Right.
I guess that's
Yeah.
why the numbers are so good. So the reference should be from 22 going on, which is good. I see a good decline,
Yes,
which is good.
yes. We're definitely heading in the right direction. And
And-
it's really all hands on deck. Everyone is full force behind chronic absenteeism.
I also, so on your previous subject, I see that there's a lot of native enrollment. That's increasing
Yes.
year after year, so we're doing a good job here.
Yes, so in the last 5 years, it's increased by 63 students.
Are we making efforts to keep that growing?
I would say yes. I don't know if you want to speak to any of that work, Mr. Burke.
Yeah, I think for the public record, I think it's good to talk about some of the things that we're doing. You know, the most notable this year is through the budgetary process and the board support, we were able to hire an individual who's working with Mohawk students and is also beginning to offer Mohawk language. So again, we're making inroads there. We are going to be reassigning an individual to be working with Native American students at Jefferson Elementary, where we have a larger number of enrollees this year. So again, yes, we're taking every opportunity we can to meet the needs of our Native American population, not just to attract more here, but really to serve the ones that we do have to the absolute best of our ability. But again, our doors are open.
Thank you for highlighting that. Okay, so now we'll take a look at our 3 through 8 assessment data, and as in each year, we'll look at the percent proficient by grade level. We'll look at the performance comparison to those regionally in St. Lawrence Louis BOCES, and then trends over time. So again, you have the information in front of you. I'll kind of pinpoint some celebrations. If you look at the comparison of our percent proficient, these are our students that get level 3 and level 4. You're going to see in almost all grade levels in ELA, math, and science that we are actually above the regional average. So that's great work on our 3 through 8 end. Also, some highlights is grade 6 math was actually ranked first in the region for their scores, and grade 5 ELA was ranked second. And just a very specific staff celebration, we actually had a grade 4 math teacher. He was in his very first year of teaching, and actually was only one student away from having 100% proficiency, and that student was only 2 points away in their scaled score. So that's pretty exciting, and we'll be celebrating him. Now these are the trends over time for the 3 through 8. So right now we're looking at the ELA. Let's give you a minute to look at that. Very similar to previous years. And really in the ELA, we're averaging in the high 40% to 50%, which is a little bit above the New York State average. And the next slide is math. And here highlighting grade 3 and grade 6, both in the high 60% proficient. And really our averages in math are a little higher than ELA. They often are in the high 40s to low 60 range of the average of over 5 years. Does anyone have any questions about 3 through 8 data? Okay, I will hand it over to Mr. Oliver to review Regents and grad rate data. Thank you so much.
Hi, everybody. Just before we even get into this, a couple of things that I'll be talking about are COVID special appeals, and I'll mention those a little bit as we get into the data. And a reminder to everybody what we talked about for the first time last year, which was the testing of all of our 15-1 students in our special education classes for Regents. And when I start showing you this, you're going to see some things that at first you're going to look at and go, ooh, and then when I explain it to you, you're going to go, oh. So as you move forward, these are a little bit different than the grade 3 through 8. They're on a 5-level scale, but it's still comparing proficiency versus proficiency. And as Robert pointed out, there was no data for 1920 or 2021, and then we started to trickle back in after that. So if you look at our regional comparison, at first glance, you see as many belows as above. But I would actually caution you to not believe what you see there, because if you look at our ELA scores, our math, so the ELA Regents, the algebra Regents, and the US history Regents particularly, which have lower numbers and they kind of stick out, those are where we have 30 to 40 15-1-1 kids from our special education programs testing and taking Regents exams that prior to last year never took those exams. So when you actually see our data projected over time, you'll see that fall off. And I would say that even though it had an impact on our proficiency rates, I would do it again and again every day, because every year since we've done this, we have kids eligible for local and Regents diplomas that as of 2 years ago would have never sat for these exams. So what looks like a negative is actually, in my eyes, a tremendous positive that we're doing at Massena Central High School. And then some of the rest of it, you know, I'm not sugarcoating things. There's some things we need to work on in there. But for the most part, where we look to be below, it's because we're adding kids into testing that haven't historically done it. So if you look at this trend, the first slide shows math. You can see that as far as algebra goes and geometry goes, we're on a nice upward trend at the high school. What you see there, or excuse me, for algebra 2, I misspoke rather than algebra. The algebra, you see the dip. That big dip last year is where we had 15-1-1 kids interjected into the system for the first time. There's obviously work to do there. I had a nice conversation with my math teachers last Friday. We have some good plans moving forward, but the big dip that you see in the last 2 years there is tied to testing a whole group of students that never got tested before. As you move forward to ELA, we need a new podium. As you move forward to ELA, you see the same drop over the last couple of years when we've been testing the 15-1-1 students. You know, that's a good, hardworking department. It's just we're testing more kids, so those numbers went down. And as I said, not insignificant. It's not like we added 5 kids. It was between 30 and 40 on each of these tests. So it was a substantial population we added to testing, most of which don't show up proficient, but a few of them do. In the science scores, we're on a slight upward trend in biology, living environment. I'll caution the board right now. I'll give you a precursor for next year. This year, we're growing the 15-1 program into living environment as well. So I can reasonably predict that next year, you're going to see an overall drop in proficiency rate here as we add our kids into this program. But that's okay, because we're doing the right thing for those students. Chemistry is pretty flat. Last year, the test, I think it was a bit difficult. Earth science, we're on a nice trend. Physics, we're on a nice trend. If you look at our social studies scores, you see that what looks to be a big drop. If you notice the blank on U.S. history, if you remember a couple of years ago, there was a Regents they didn't offer because there was a question on the test that they threw out the test for. That's why there's a blank bar there. And then coming back out of that, we started testing the 15-1 kids, so that's where you're seeing the big drop. If you took out those 15-1 kids, I didn't do all the exact mathematics, but you'd be just about where we were. So I think we'd look fairly flat with those kids out of there.
Alan?
Yes, sir.
Just a quick question. Assume other districts are doing the same thing, right? Testing 15-1 students?
I can't speak to that. My assumption from speaking with my colleagues is I actually think we're ahead of the curve on that. I think we're testing more than some of the surrounding districts are, but I can't say that with any confidence, Paul. I wish I could. But anecdotally, I think we're probably testing more students and putting them in front of Regents exams than other districts are,
So
which would explain some of what we're seeing.
It's not a state mandate then?
It is absolutely not.
Okay.
But we're trying to do as much as we can to get regular education curriculum and material in front of all of our special education students.
Right.
And to be honest with the board, we were probably overly ambitious in our original implementation of this, and we're going to start to roll back from it a little bit. But we had to kind of jump in with 2 feet to see what the kids could do and then make some intelligent decisions as we move forward. So I think you'll start to see some of those kids come out of the testing, so you'll see some natural equalization of this number over the next couple of years.
So essentially, it's a least restrictive environment
Correct.
type of a thing.
Yeah,
Okay.
and what we're finding is we went probably too least restrictive with some of our students, so we're going to dial some of it back, but not all of it back. But it was still the right thing to try to see who was capable of doing what. So then you get into the graduation rate stuff. This is interesting. I could have predicted. Am I supposed to do anything with this slide? Okay. If you're interested to compare data in New York State, I think in your presentation you can hit this link and check it out. But I'm here more to talk about ours. So I could have and did predict several years ago, even when Superintendent Brady was still here, that this last year's class was going to kind of be the one that I was worried about coming out of COVID. This was the class that, if I recall properly, missed their entire junior high school career. They went remote in their 7th grade year, and then they were hybrid in their 8th grade year. And then all the habits that were picked up about attendance and school participation during the junior high time kind of forecasted into high school. So we've been chasing some of that stuff, and I'm looking at Mr. Tusa because I think he lives some of this on a daily basis as well. So our graduation rate, I would have told you, I knew it was going to be a hit last year. So whether it was right or wrong, I decided to do something else within the building last year, which was to tighten up a lot of things that had gotten loose, because I figured we were going to take a little bit of a hit last year, so why not take all the hit all at once? So we actually re-implemented some rules about attendance requirements and grade requirements to be able to be eligible for summer school, because prior to last year, basically you could miss the entire school year, show up for summer school, do the course in 2 weeks, and get the same credit as somebody that had been there for all 40 weeks in the regular school year. So, and what that was a 50-50 rule. It was actually very generous. It was if you were absent less than 50 times, or if you had a grade of less than a 50, you weren't eligible for summer school. And that actually hit a high number of our students, particularly our seniors. So having said all that, that's why the June graduation rate looks the way it did. We definitely rolled backwards a couple of points last year. You know, we were at 79, we dropped down to 71.5. But I want you to pay attention more to that August graduation rate. all of those students that didn't make it, we had what was our summer school graduation, Ron? You remember? It was near 20, I believe. It was a large class, so a bunch of kids didn't make it in June, but nearly all of them made it out in August. And that was after coming in and making up classes. A lot of them, I think of particular students that we just couldn't get in school last year, and then we got them back in here in the summer, and a few of them needed Regents exams and things like that. So I would like you to pay attention more to that August rate than the June rate. The June rate was always kind of going to happen last year. I probably even said it at graduation last year to anybody that was there. But we're right back on, we're a couple of points lower, but I would tell you that I think those of us in the high school that have been working with these kids, if you could have told us we would have got almost 82% of these kids by the end of August, we would have taken that. And we would have gladly taken that. So we actually feel pretty proud of that number. And I think when you throw the state number in next year, we're not going to be too far off the mark from where the state is in the August graduation rate. There was also in the corner there, you guys had requested some information about how our CTE students do, our kids that go to BOCES and are in career and technical education. So Nicole, I don't even know how she did this, but she was able to go through and pull this data out. And as you would rightfully expect, when you compare our graduation rate for all students versus our BOCES students are killing it. The kids that go to BOCES are graduating at almost 100% rate when you look at the end of the August graduation. And that makes sense to me. When we send kids to BOCES, we're sending them to high interest programs, but more important than that, to go to BOCES, you have to be a student in good standing and on track for graduation. So the kids that are going to BOCES are in good shape, and when they get there, they get into high interest, high value programs, and they're very, very successful. I believe you guys also would like to see like a regional comparison, like how our kids fare against other kids. I'm speaking for Nicole, and if she wants to say something, she can. We don't know how to get that data. This isn't state data. This is something we pulled out of our own school tool system. This number is not reported to the state separately, so it's not something that we can get for other school districts in the region. But we wanted to share that data with you as well. Did I get everything we needed on that? And I think, then if you go on, you go on, I go on. If you go on to the last slide, it just shows you the subgroup comparison. Overall, if I was being honest with the board, what we're working on through our MTSS process and what becomes more clear year after year is we're a school that has a fairly decent classification of special education students. We have a high poverty rate in our area. We're struggling with attendance, which is getting better, and I can report to you it's actually remarkably better so far this year. So I think we've turned a corner on attendance, or at least I hope we have. And really, there's a substantial subset of our population that are searching for relevance in what we're putting in front of them, and we're well aware of that. And those kids are, they're hard. Those are kids we're fighting one kid at a time to figure out how to get them back in here. And unfortunately, those issues tend to not exist in isolation. It tends to be those issues layer on certain kids, and they become a real challenge. And each one of them, it takes a lot of work and effort to get back in here, but we're real proud of the work that we're doing. Obviously, there's places we can improve, there always is, but I think generally we're heading in the right direction. So at this point, do you guys have any questions for me?
Yes. So if BOCES is at, our board goal is to increase graduation rate, I believe. Yeah. So if BOCES is at, I'm just going to ask a question and see where it leads. If BOCES is graduating at close to 100%, if we send a student to BOCES, we're almost 100% guaranteed that they're going to graduate. And if the students here were at, take away all the other variables, we're at maybe 80%.
Mm-hmm.
Are we holding back any students from going to BOCES? Because it seems like they stand a better chance of graduation if they're going there. So what's our process for selection? Are we limited to the number of kids that go to BOCES in any way?
we send a lot of kids to BOCES from this school. We send probably, we graduate, let's say for a rough number, 200 kids in a cohort is what we normally have, somewhere between 180 and 200. We send about 80 to 90 kids from each class to BOCES. So I don't feel limited. Are there kids that get turned away from BOCES? Yes, but they also are not just being turned away because we don't have space. It's about putting candidates to BOCES that are likely to be successful there. So if we have students that say have a horrid absenteeism record and we've been working with them on it, or they just don't have the academic preparation needed to be there, you know, to go to BOCES, you have to have certain Regents exams in your pocket because there's no other opportunity to take them once you go to BOCES and things of that nature. So I don't believe that what we need is more BOCES slots. I think what we need to do is give a BOCES experience to our younger students to keep them involved with school longer. And get them to that 11th grade year. And that's really where my efforts have been over the last couple of years. I've been working very hard with SUNY Canton to start a pre-vocational experience here, where that includes our survey of the trades class, our new electric switch vehicle class, these very sort of hands-on technical experiences targeted at younger students. This year we transitioned all of our STEM science into a STEAM program, where in that science class they're also doing 3D printing and laser engraving and computer coding and all kinds of stuff to try and give a more, I don't want to say vocational, but probably that's the right word to use, a more vocational hand-on experience. Because
Project-based.
Yeah, project-based, but just more tactile, less sitting in a room listening to a teacher reading books. You know, if you start to look at how the face of Massena has changed in the 20 years I've been here, it's pretty significant. You know, the students that go to our school, probably 20 years ago, if any of you are alumni, you know, what percentage of our kids were college-bound students? And what percentage of our kids do we think are college-bound today? And when you start to look at those things, there's some systemic issues that we need to take a look at in the high school, and we are. So, you know, we've got plenty of work to do. We're not looking for things to do.
Yep.
But really what I'm trying to do and what our staff is trying to do is find those kids that are successful in BOCES in their 11th and 12th grade year and get kids to that part. We know once we get them there, we're okay. Where we're losing kids is typically in the freshman and sophomore year because BOCES seems like an eternity away to them. So that's really where our efforts are right now.
Yeah, and hopefully this new pathways, if they ever get it going, might be a life vest for them and give us opportunities towards that end.
I think anything that gives us more local control about what's best for our own kids and how to determine proficiency for our own kids is inherently a good thing, and I would be a huge supporter of that. So.
Has anyone reached out to, is there any, well, BOCES is limited, but typically BOCES provides what school districts can't provide on their own. Is there, what's binding us on a 9th and 10th grade program? Is there a legal obstruction, or is it financial? Is it a facility issue?
Maybe a little bit of everything you just said. We've been engaged, Ron's been for 2 years now engaged with, we've had multi-district collaborative conversations on this exact topic to try and really get our own programming going or work with other programming, and not just for vocational stuff, but for perhaps alternative education placements or high needs special education programs. We've been looking at all those things. It's all the same things that I'm sure as board members you hear all the time. It's space, it's staffing, it's how are you going to do it. And what sounds like a great idea is, it sounds real easy until you try to practically figure out how to build it. So those conversations are all going on. The one thing I can absolutely tell every member of the board is we know well who our kids are, and we know the ones we're serving well, and we know the ones that we need to get some more support for, and we're trying our best to do that. And I'll be honest with the board, I didn't say thank you at the start, but there hasn't been a time in the 20 years I've been a principal here that I've ever asked for anything for a kid that it's been said no. It's just trying to build the right, it's trying to get the biggest bang for your buck when you're bringing in programming, because you can't do everything you want to do, so you got to pick the things that you can do and make them the most impactful you can. So.
Well, hopefully the information from LifeTrack will point out things to us that maybe we're not seeing and give us some data we can work with on what we're doing and how it's faring for those graduates. As you mentioned, we've seen lots of change in the community, and this data is going to be super important for what we're doing as an assessment, our assessment.
No such thing as bad data. Everything helps you make better decisions. So.
Each dropout are looked at carefully, and we try to find a source or categorize them or try to find a reason why they dropped out.
I'm not trying to overstate this. We can tell you who they live, where they live, who their parents are, how many times we've been to their house, what conversations we've had with them. There's nobody that drops out of this place that we don't know and we haven't tried to intervene on. I can say that with full confidence.
And knowing that we can limit the damage for future years.
And what I wish I could capture for you, which is next to impossible too, is the kids that we have prevented from dropping out. I can't capture that for you, because how do you prove a negative? How do you prove that somebody didn't do something and then you impacted that? The staff in this building is nothing short of extraordinary, and the work they do on the daily is miraculous. There's obviously more to do and more improvements to make, but you should be super proud of the staff here. They're really working hard with really challenging kids, if I'm being honest about it. So.
One thing that Mr. Oliver glossed over is he did last year what I tried for almost 3 years while the assistant superintendent at BOCES used to do, and I failed each year, and that is to really create some positive inroads with SUNY Canton and get classes actually offered here. When I first joined a meeting, I just kept thinking, all right, this is an hour I'll never get back in my life, because I know right where it's going to go, and I'll be darned, but next thing Mr. Oliver says, yeah, we've got the agreement, can you sign it? So I think those are positives. I don't know that this is going to take a regional effect. We've tried this, we've talked about this. I think there's a lot of concern among the parties that be that this will be a reincarnation of some of the other programs that have been tried in the past with unfortunate failure, such as a Pinewood program, which some of us may remember, and some of the other programs that were out there. I think trying to do this in-house and capturing the students at 9th and 10th grade, just like we're looking at right now, that's going to be the key to really long-term improvement of our graduation rate.
Well, yeah, and to say, we have one class that we built with SUNY Canton, but just so the board knows, we have articulation agreements for 14 different classes at the high school that SUNY Canton is just giving college credit for. And that's not us. That's something SUNY Canton is putting out into the universe, and we would have been foolish not to take advantage of, and we took advantage of it in a big way here. So. Any other questions? Thanks as always, guys.
Okay, the next item is I will be requesting that the board consider a request to declare as surplus one double-door refrigerator. We're not quite sure if it works or not, or how well it works. And the final request I would have of the board is to approve a bus utilization for tomorrow for Horizons. They're taking a trip to the Breezy Maple Farm. And that concludes my report.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Burke. We'll move on now to recommended actions. First is the consent agenda. Does anyone on the board wish to have any consent agenda items taken out of consent for further discussion or question answering, anything at all? Okay, hearing no requests, I would entertain a motion to accept the consent agenda items. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, the consent agenda passes. Moving on now to other items for action. Things we'll take up individually. First is the approval of the audited financial statements and single audit findings. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Next is approval of the single audit findings corrective action plan. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Okay, that carries. Next is the approval of the 2024-25 Board of Education goals. Any discussion? I have something that I would like to propose as a change to board goal number 4. Number 4 is the Board of Education will create a focus goal on the graduating class of 2025 by using tools such as the Life Track Survey, a graduation ceremony policy and/or logistics, and a board-sponsored reception event for seniors. One change that I would like to propose for this, I'm not sure how much I like the focus on the class of 2025 only. I think I'd like to change that to focus goal on the graduating class of 2025 and subsequent graduating classes, or something to that effect, so that it's something that we try to implement each year as opposed to just for 2025. And
it's a goal for just this year, right? So
yeah,
it's semantics maybe. We need to focus on it, start looking at it, and if we find value in the data that we start to get, we'll keep doing it. It'll be a goal every year. So it just, my only point is it may not matter, the language.
okay.
I don't think it matters. I think it only matters that we look at it. So.
Any similar comments? Does that make sense? I guess I can live with that argument. Yeah. Okay. And the only other change I'd like to make to this, or would propose to make to this, I'm not sure, and this was actually something that I put in. This was not something that Trish, when she forwarded the goal to me, I just sort of arbitrarily picked a completion date, and to me it doesn't make a whole lot of sense to have a completion date of April 1st when, if we were to do a graduation, a reception event for graduates, that would not probably be done before April 1st. So I think I'd like to propose changing that, the goal completion to June 30th. Does that make sense? Well, that may be, we're trying to keep things within the school year, and I would also remind the board that Life Track, which is a big part of this goal, the Life Track survey, is also something that Mr. Burke is very focused on in his superintendent goals that he has enumerated, and we will be evaluating him on when we do his evaluation through super eval. So I know Mr. Burke is very focused on making sure that LifeTrack goes the way it should go. So I think a lot of the other objectives speak more to the reception event and the creation of the graduation ceremony policy. That would be my interpretation. So do I have consent on just changing the completion date to June 30th for this? Everybody good with that? Okay. So we're going to keep the proposed wording of goal number 4 to focusing on the graduating class of 2025 and changing the goal completion date to June 30th. Any other comments or comments that anyone would like to make on the other goals? Okay, I believe...
I find that we have a lot of goals. I think 4 goals is a lot. Just a comment.
I think any more would be difficult. I believe we have a motion and a second. Is that correct? Okay. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of the board goals for this year? Any opposed? Okay. Thank you. Next is the approval of the bus utilization request from Horizons for tomorrow. Any questions or comments? All in favor? Opposed? That carries. Approval of the Elementary Yearbook Advisor MOA with the MFT. Questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? I don't think so. That carries. Approval of the cheerleading MOA with the MFT. Right. Okay. Any discussion, questions, comments? All in favor? Any opposed? That passes. And on to approval of personnel action items. Mr. Burke.
I would recommend the approval of the personnel action items listed numbers 1 through 104.
Can we subtract 95 so I can abstain?
With the exception of 95.
Thank you. 95?
Okay, we have a motion.
Motion.
I'm sorry, 96.
96, is it? Okay. Maybe this was 96, sorry.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. All in favor of those personnel action items other than 96?
So move. Sorry. Who was the second?
Any opposed?
Who was the second?
Who seconded that? I did. Yeah, I thought so. Tim, you were a yes vote on that, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
And now I recommend approval of personnel item number 96.
Any questions or comments? All in favor? Any opposed? Any abstentions? Did you get that, Ashley? Okay, thank you. That's it, Mr. Burke? Okay. Next is items under new business, future agenda items. Anyone with something they would like to have discussed at a future Board of Education meeting?
I know at some point, it wouldn't have to be a big presentation, but I'd love to hear more about the college credit-bearing courses through Canton. And I'd like to hear more about some of the in-house programming that I know we've got here at the high school that's more hands-on. I think it'd be good for all of us to have a deeper understanding of what we're offering. And I also think it would be good for the board to hear all of the creative things that are happening, especially at the elementary level, to get kids into school every day. I see some of that hitting my own house. I'm reading about it, and well, it was just the other day. I had to write down all of the different colors, and Jersey Day and Wear Red Day, and so I had to write all of that out so that I could stick it in the right place so that I could remind my fifth grader. But those are all things that get kids in the buildings every day. So again, not a real lengthy presentation, but I think it would be good for the board. We make you present, our administration present on absenteeism, and I think we should have a strong understanding of everything they're doing, because there's a lot of creative things happening.
And piggybacking on Dan's suggestion of the college credit-bearing courses, it would be really neat to, if there are some students that sort of have a path that they are creating, or that they're in the process of creating for themselves, that will utilize those credits, and just to have them come and tell us what they're getting out of those programs would be, I'd love to hear the student perspective on some of that stuff. Any other future agenda items to come forth?
Yeah, I'd be interested in some sort of a grassroots study from our own staff on a cost-benefit analysis for grade level elementary buildings as opposed to neighborhood elementary buildings. We've had multiple things occur with an influx of students from the east, and we've had the closing of Trinity, and there's all sorts of staffing shortages and different variables we deal with every day, and I'd be interested in a tally of the pros and cons of what efficiencies we could develop through a grade level elementary, or we wouldn't develop, or what are we holding back with this? What type of economies of scale could we get? Is there benefits to the educational process of how we do it? Because if you think about it, one of the things I've heard over the number of years I've been on the board is the big transition when all of the elementaries go to the junior high. And if we had grade level schools, that transition would happen on day one. They would be exposed to all the other kids they would go to school with in those grades. And that would get, so that's sort of a kind of a smaller scale thing that would go away. And and I'd be interested to see where it leads us. But I don't think we need a consultant to do that. I think we have the right consultants that are already on our payroll.
If it's okay, if you'd indulge me on that one, I'm thinking that could actually become really probably a year and a half goal on my part, where we could take a look at what data we have from the previous study, what data do we currently have, where were some of the pitfalls that were identified in the last study, the pros, the cons, identify those, and also identify those questions like you're talking about, Kevin, but I think I can do that through one of my goals, Wouldn't necessarily, and I probably won't put it in super eval, only because it might not get completed this year.
Yep.
But I can at least have it as an ancillary on the side so you folks can look at it with some timelines. But I do think that that's it's not something that I don't believe we can get it done in a year, because I think that at some point we're also going to have to talk to our stakeholder groups as well.
Yep.
You know, to see exactly what the opinions are, because this is it presents a major change in the way that we do business at Massena if we go down that road. But I think it's worth exploring.
If we point out the pros and the cons and then sort of a cost benefit analysis that we've come up with, then the data will lead us where it leads us.
Exactly. I'll start working on that and have it for you for approval at the next meeting as a ancillary goal.
Okay, thank you.
Anything else? Hearing nothing, our next item is communications from the public and press. We have neither here this evening. Are we monitoring the YouTube feed for? Do we do that anymore? I know we were. There are no comments.
Not yet.
Okay, so that is something that is still available to folks watching the live stream to do. Okay, thank you. I think at this point we've completed our business, and I would call for a motion for adjournment. Any, well, all in favor?
Good idea.